Okay, I'm going to go through this PowerPoint slide presentation, which is also available on Moodle, fairly quickly. I'm going to try to do it in less than 15 minutes, which is the time limit given by this recording tool. So we go into the narrative elements, and the elements we're going to look at today are character, plot and structure, point of view, setting, tone, theme, imagery, figurative language, and allegory. Some of these I'll go through relatively quickly because these are things that you are already pretty aware of from the previous study that you've done and some of the things that we've done. So protagonist is the main character, usually seen in a positive light. The antagonist is the opposite of the main character, often seen in a negative light. A minor character supplies support to the main character, to the protagonist, and often, and sometimes there's minor characters that supply support to the antagonist as well. But we often see, as we've talked about, that the minor characters are also those characters who have a disability or who are a person of another race or nationality. So that's often a way that an author will bring some diversity into a book that he or she is writing. A static character is a character that doesn't change throughout the novel, and we often think about if the protagonist is a static character, that gives us kind of a negative impression of the book. The dynamic character is the one that changes from the beginning to the end, and again, this is often the protagonist who has the most change, and sometimes it's the antagonist who changes. And then the characterization is, how did the author give you the characteristics of this character? So is that done through dialogue? Is it done through the narrator actually telling something about this character? Is it done through the thoughts that you hear of the character? And there's a number of other ways that we'll talk later about flashbacks, and those kinds of things can sometimes give us clues as to who the character is and what has happened. Okay, looking at the plot and structure, we have foreshadowing. This is often used in mystery books where the author might say something very direct, like, I wish I had known, the narrator might say, I wish I had known what was going to happen next, or something like that, where the foreshadowing is quite direct. The reader kind of knows that something is coming, and sometimes it's a little less direct, that there's an implicit understanding that something is going to happen, but the author doesn't name it quite as directly. We have this idea of suspense, and again, this is something that's often seen in mysteries, and this is a tension that the author creates. So there's something that's unknown, and the reader is not sure, like, how the question is going to be answered, whether somebody is being interrogated or whether they're going for a walk, and the reader knows something might happen but is not sure what that would be. The conflict is a struggle between opposing forces, and we know from our study of literature that this conflict can be between the character, the main character, and another character, or it can be between the main character and something within herself. So between self and others, between self and self, and then the conflict can also be between the characters and the environment. So there's lots of kind of traditional conflicts that can be set up. Exposition is the background information about the setting, characters, and plots. And again, this is where the author can use some flashbacks. She can use dialogue between characters talking about things that are happening in the present or things that have happened in the past. Again, giving us clues as to why characters are acting in certain ways. So these next three describe a typical plot structure, and you can follow my cursor as we have this rising action and then a pause, and then rising action and a pause, and rising action. And then as it goes up toward the top, we reach a crisis. And that crisis can be a good thing or a bad thing that happens in the story that kind of helps resolve all the things that have been happening within this rising plot structure. And then that crisis leads to a resolution and a denouement. So you can see that the going back down to sort of normal, or in some ways back to the beginning, is a much quicker decline than our slow, 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 step-by-step rising plot structure. So this is what we call a typical Western version of a narrative plot structure, and we'll talk in class about other structures that are more typical for other cultures. As far as structure of a poem, we can have a closed form versus a very open form, and a closed form would be when the maybe the poet is writing a sonnet and they know that there's going to be 14 lines and each line has a certain number of syllables, or an open form where we don't know how many lines are going to be in the poem and we don't know how many syllables or how long or short each individual line is going to be. The final thing is that we have in fiction, as far as the poetry, we can look for things like repeated action. So this is something that we've talked about in our children's stories, that there are lots of times when there's repeated action within that. We can look for a dialogue, a description, as well as shifts in direction. The shifts in direction or focus are not as much seen in picture books, because picture books are often just telling one short story. But in longer books and books for young adults and adults, we may see the book going in one direction and then going in another, or we may see changing narrators. So this section of the book is told from the point of view of the protagonist, and then this is told from the point of view of one of the more minor characters that gives you clues into the conflict or the protagonist or something like that. So we'll look at setting. We have, in general, the setting includes the place and the time, but often people forget about time and they just include, when they describe the setting, they describe the place. But we must always know when this story is taking place. Looking for things within the book is, how does the setting become another character in the book? So thinking about some of the books that you've read recently, like I recently read a book called Pachinko, and Pachinko was set in Japan, but the main characters in the book were Korean immigrants in Japan. And so the setting of Japan really influenced how these characters acted, and in that sense became another character in the book. And then we can also think about books where the setting is completely unimportant. Those are harder to find, but we can think especially about some of our children's books, and thinking about where there's very little background, very little behind the characters on the page or behind the words that are telling the story. Now, looking at tone, we can think about the tone is the implied attitude toward the characters. we have clues as to the tone is the use of voice in both dialogue and in the narration of the story. For in writing for children, we often see writing that where the tone is seen as playful, while young adult and adult books often have more sinister or sarcastic tones. Not that that can't be seen in writing for children, but it's just less common. Okay, we also want to look at the theme of a book. What is the message that the book is trying to convey? Or is it ever just a story? For example, we can think about Beauty and the Beast, which is which is just coming out, the new version of Beauty and the Beast as a movie. And what message is the author trying to convey? That the author is conveying this message that even though the beast is ugly on the outside, we can look to the inside and see beauty within that beast. So that thinking about not even just maybe as simply as not judging a book by its cover. But what is the hidden message or theme within this traditional story? And one of the hidden messages, and we've talked about this a little bit in class, is the idea that women are subservient to men. So Beauty was subservient first to her father, and she did make this choice to help her father, but then she's doing that choice maybe because she feels like that's the only choice she can make. And then another hidden message or theme within this traditional story is thinking about again the subservience of women. Is we're thinking about that in the way that Beauty is subservient to the beast. And even though Beauty reacts against this subservience, there's still that kind of message that's being conveyed. Okay, I'm going to stop this here, and we're going to start a new recording that starts with the next slide, which will be imagery. So we'll start that there.